Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Okay, so he says, if you remember last week we finished off the 8th category of those whose zakat can be given to, who are the Ibn Sabil. And we talked about what does Ibn Sabil mean. And then we finished there. So now he says, وابن السبيل من كان له مال في وطنه وهو في مكان آخر لا شيء له فيه. Ibn Sabil is a person who has mal, so he's not really poor absolutely. He has mal, but that mal is in his hometown. وهو في مكان آخر, but he is in a different place, different location. لا شيء له فيه, in such a place in which he has nothing there. So meaning he doesn't have access to his funds. And we mentioned this last time as well. The not having access to your funds seems to be the main illa here. So whether the person is Ibn Sabil or whether the person is in a different form of an individual, that person, let's say for example, he's unable to get into his city, unable to get into his accounts or whatever, then that person is considered to be a person who is Ibn Sabil. Then he says, قال فهذه جهات الزكاة. So these are considered to be the different aspects of zakat, or the different individuals to whom zakat can be given. So these are different aspects or perspectives of zakat. فَلِلْمَالِكِ أَنْ يَدْفَعْ إِلَى كُلِّ وَاحِدٍ مِّنْهُمْ. The possessor of the zakat, the donor, the zakat giver, the malik, he has the right to give إِلَى كُلِّ وَاحِدٍ مِّنْهُمْ, to each one of them 8 categories. وَلَهُ, and he also has the right أَنْ يَقْتَصِرَ عَلَى صِنْفٍ وَاحِدٍ, to suffice with simply one of the 8. So whenever in fiqh we have the word lahu, lahu refers to he has the right. Yeah, so he has the right. So what does it mean that when we say that a person has the right to do this? It means it's not necessary. It's not like ala. Ala means it's necessary that they have to do this. But over here it's actually he has the right. Now why is he mentioning this for? Because in the Quran, because Allah says, if you go back to this verse over here, if you notice the verse, it says, إِنَّمَا الصَّدَقَاتُ لِلْفُقَرَاءِ. Sadaqat is only for the fuqara. Yeah, وَالْمَسَاكِينَ وَالْعَامِلِينَ atafs, there's multiple atafs there. So are we saying that zakat has to be given to all of those categories in order for zakat to be considered to be valid? Are we saying that zakat has to be given to all categories? Or is it sufficient simply to give zakat to just one category? This is where we differ with the Shafis on this masla. He says, قال الشافعي رحمه الله لا يجوز إلا أن يصرف إلى ثلاثة من كل صنف. So according to Imam Shafi, he says zakat is not permissible unless it is given yusraf or yusrifu and yusrifa, that he gives to 3 people from every sinf. Why is this for? So remember, there's 8 categories. So if you minus the mu'allafat al-qulub, there's 7. So let's say there's 7 categories. If I am to give 70 pounds of zakat, that means that I have to give, or let's say for example, just to make it easier, if I had to give 21 pounds of zakat, I would have to give each of the categories, right? So 3 people in each category, I'd have to give them. So in the fuqara, I have to find 3 fuqara and give them £1 each. And then I have to find 3 masakin, give them £1 each. And I have to find 3 amilin and so forth. Yeah, that's the idea. لا يجوز إلا أن يصرف إلى ثلاثة من كل صنف. So zakat cannot be, a person cannot discharge themselves of zakat unless they give it to each of the categories. And in those categories, they have to give it to at least 3 people or more. Why is this for? لأن الإضافة بحرف اللام للاستحقاق. Because he claims that when it says lam, للفقراء, yeah, للفقراء. So if you go back to this ayah again, so notice over here, it's got إنما الصدقة للفقراء. Yeah, the whole ayah is here. والمساكين. And these atafs are all going back onto fuqara. Fuqara is the ma'tuf alayhi. Masakin, amilin, all of that is the ma'tuf. Therefore, the ma'tuf is actually going back to something which is majroor bi harf jar li. Okay, and that's obviously for the li, and then you got these fi ones over here. Yeah, وَفِي الرِّقَابِ وَالْغَارِمِينَ وَفِي سَبِيلِ اللَّهِ وَابْنِ السَّبِيلِ. Yeah, so over there, is it فِي الرِّقَابِ وَفِي الْغَارِمِينَ, or is it غَارِمِين goes back to, that's an ikhtilafi issue that Mufassirin have mentioned. You can look in the books of tafsir for that. I'm not going to go into that. But all I'm going to say over here is that Imam Shafi says that because of the lam has been mentioned, that lam comes for istihqaq. Yeah, so lil istihqaq, meaning that this lam basically means that it is, they deserve it. Zakat is deserved by the fuqara. All right. Now, he hasn't really elaborated why 3 then. Seems as though the case is because Allah has used a jama. Yeah, a jama has been used. Yes, plural has been used. So first of all, every group has to get it, and that's with the lam. And then the 3 from every group has to be given it because 3 is considered to be a jama. So if you have the word, for example, like I'm going to give the fuqara zakat, I'm going to give the fuqara, al-fuqara, that would be assumed that you're going to give it to all of them. Yeah, so whoever it is, or at least 3 of them, because you'd only use a jama if there was 3 there. So this is a very strong argument. This is that jama, whenever you use a jama, then that jama, like if I say to you, I'm going to give you al-kutub. So if I gave you 1 kitab, I haven't done what I've said, right? Because it has to be at least 3 for this to work. And Hanafis have also mentioned this masla or a similar masla in the chapter of wasiyah as well. Yeah, wasiyah, where the person says, I'm doing a wasiyah that I'm going to give ad-darahim. So ad-darahim would refer to at least 3 dirhams because the minimum of jama is 3. Okay, so it's a wrong, but he hasn't mentioned the reason there. Other places have mentioned it. وَلَنَا, our response is أَنَّ الْإِضَافَةَ لِبَيَانِ أَنَّهُمْ مَصَارِف. So first of all, we say the idafa. What's idafa? Idafa of lam. We don't call this idafa really in Nahu, but the adding of lam onto the majroor. Yeah, idafatul lam, the adding of lam. This is for libayan annahum masarifu. This is to explain. Yeah, this is to explain that these are masarif. Meaning, if I add a lam onto a word, either this can mean that they deserve it. Like if I say to you, Hadal kitab li Zayd. What does that mean? So that simply means this book is for Zayd, meaning he deserves it. It belongs to him. So he's a mustahiq of it. That's one possibility. And a second possibility is that we say that this is considered to be, this is like a place where zakat can be given. This is the masraf of zakat. So what does masraf of zakat refer to? It means basically Allah is saying, you know your zakat, these are your options of where zakat can be given. Yeah, so it's like the place where the zakat can actually be discharged. So annahum masarifu, that these are considered to be the masarif, la li ithbat al-istihqaq. This is not for ithbat istihqaq. Yeah, so in other words, ithbat istihqaq means this is not to say that they deserve it, because if it means they deserve it, that means every one of them deserves it. The fuqara deserve it, and the masakin deserve it, and the amilin deserve it. And if that's the case, that means your zakat, however much you have, whether it's £1 you have, or whether it's £100 you have, your zakat has to go to all of them. Yeah, because they all deserve it. They all equally deserve this. We say no, it's not that. We say it's referring to the masraf, meaning these are the individuals where your zakat can go. Yeah, it's like me saying, for example, this book is for the students. It could mean this, they deserving this, or it could mean this is going to go to them. لا لإثبات الاستحقاق. وهذا, and how do we know this? لما عرف أن الزكاة حق الله تعالى. We know zakat is not really their haqq. It's not the haqq of the faqir. It's actually the haqq of Allah, because it's ibadah, and all ibadat go back to the huquq of Allah. لما عرف أن الزكاة حق الله تعالى. This is considered to be one of the rights of Allah, the many rights that we're supposed to give to Allah. وبإلة الفقر صاروا مصارف. So it's not that they deserve it. It's that the reason why, let's say for example, there's 2 guys, Zayd and his brother. Zayd is a poor person and his brother is a rich person. So when we say the fuqara can be given, Zayd comes under fuqara because he has the illah of faqr inside of him. Yeah, so therefore that zakat which is deserving for Allah, he is the mustahiq of zakat. Yeah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he is the one who then allows that money to be given to the person who has this characteristic of faqr inside of him. Likewise, miskin. If there's a guy who's a miskin, he doesn't deserve that zakat. What it means is that Allah is the one who has the right of zakat, and He has told us that go on, you're allowed to give your zakat to such and such a person. Yeah. So again, it's understanding the illa over here. So وَبِإِلَّةِ الْفَقْرِ صَارُوا مَصَارِفِ. Yeah. So therefore, with the illa of the faqr, meaning with that legal cause of poverty, that legal cause of poverty now is the reason for why we're allowed to give our zakat to them. Yeah. And maybe, a close example to try and understand this would be something like if a person says, like in fasting as well. So if a person can't fast, so they have to give fidya. That fidya is ta'amu miskin, feeding of a miskin. So feeding of a miskin is not that they deserve to be fed. It's that in order for us to be able to fulfill the right of making up that fast, Allah has told us to give our food or feed a poor person. So he says, وَبِإِلَّةِ الْفَقْرِ, and with the illa of faqr saru masar. That's where we differ with it. That's like the line between us and the Shafis. Shafis are saying that these 8 categories or 7 categories are deserving of the zakat. And if they're deserving equally. Whereas the Hanafis, they say no. They say Allah is the one that deserves the zakat because it's an ibadah. And then He identifies to us the people who qualify for this. So, بِإِلَّةِ الْفَقْرِ صَارُوا مَصَارِفِ فَلَا يُبَالَى, therefore there's no consideration بِاخْتِلَافِ جِهَاتِهِ. So if Allah, therefore that means Allah is saying to you, it's like saying zakat is for these people. And if you look at the revelation of this verse as well, the revelation of this verse seems to indicate this as well. Why was this verse revealed for? So if you look at the Surah Tawbah, the munafiqs are the ones that were saying they deserve to be given handouts, they deserve funds. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the one that clarified this point, that no, that innama sadaqat is only for these people. It's only for these people. These are the only masarif. The munafiqs are not the masarif. فَلَا يُبَالَى, therefore there's no consideration for ikhtilaf al-jihad. Ikhtilaf al-jihad means the different categories. Different categories will only be considered if we're using the concept of istihqaq. We're not looking at istihqaq here. We're looking at Allah is rightfully is the one that possesses the right of the zakat, and then He tells us who the zakat can be given to, through the illah. وَالَّذِي ذَهَبْنَا إِلَيْهِ مَرْوِيٌّ عَنْ عُمَرْ وَابْنِ عَبَّاسٍ. And what we've taken is also considered to be the illah for the illah concept is taken by Umar and Ibn Abbas as well. Yeah, so they also held this position where zakat can be given to one category. How do we know this? So he doesn't mention it over here, but if you look in the hash at the bottom, yeah, it says لا تصدقوا إلا على أهل دينكم فأنزل okay, it's not over here, but there's a narration over here. أن النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم بعث معاذ إلى اليمن وفيه أعلمهم. Yeah, this is the one. Yeah, he said he explained أن الله افترض عليهم صدقة في أموالهم تؤخذ من أغنيائهم وترد إلى فقرائهم. It's taken from their rich and it's returned to their poor. Returned to their poor. So by saying to their poor, right, it means it's given to the people who are poor, who are deserving of it. Yeah. So in other words, there's no mentioning over there that has to be given to all categories, or that it has to be given to 3 in each category. None of that is considered to be mentioned. Okay. Yeah. All right. Now, he has mentioned this discussion over here. However, in other places, like in the books of Usul, especially in, for example, Nur al-Anwar, if you read Nur al-Anwar, then over there, this discussion is actually mentioned as well, which is the discussion with regards to Jama. So if you have a Jama word, right, when you have a Jama word, it by default, applies to at least minimum 3 individuals in order for it to be a Jama. Yeah, this is according to majority of the scholars. It's only in things like Salat, Bil Jama'ah, where 2 can be considered a Jama, or especially in Wasiyah and Mirath, where 2 can be considered to be Jama. For example, like in the Quran, when Allah says, فَإِن كُنَّ نِسَاءً فَوْقَ اثْنَتَيْنِ, that if the deceased has left behind 2 women, like 2 daughters, yeah. So in kunna nisa'an, if they has left behind women, nisa, fawqa اثنتين, above 2, and here he means Allah over here refers to 2, meaning 2 or more. So those of you guys who have done inheritance, you know, if a man has left behind 1 daughter, the 1 daughter will get half of all the wealth. And if he has left behind 2 daughters, the 2 daughters will share 2/3. But the Quran says nisa specifically. So shouldn't that be for 3? So everyone's unanimous on this, that women in inheritance, Jama is used for 2 or more. So that shows that Jamas usually are used for 3. This is normally, besides those exempted scenarios that we mentioned. However, if you have a Jama, and then you have an alif lam that's added onto that word, and this alif lam is an alif lam of jins, then what can happen in that situation is that this can even apply to 1 individual. Yeah, so it can apply to 1 individual. So if you have a nisa can mean 3 or more, and alif lam being added onto it can refer to 1. Yeah, so an-nisa, it can mean even 1. And the example that they give is that if a man was to say, Wallahi la atazawwaj an-nisa, Wallahi la atazawwaj an-nisa, I will not marry the women. So they say, Hanafi say, this does not mean 3 or more. Like, I'm allowed to marry 1, I'm allowed to marry 2, but I can't marry more than 2, 3 or more. No, it actually even applies to 1. And why is that? Because when you have a Jama, and that Jama has an alif lam attached to the beginning of it, and this alif lam is for jins, not for ahad, then that means that now this is going to be considered to be applicable to 1 as well, because jins applies to al-fard al-kamil, and fard al-kamil is 1 individual. Okay, so this is a usuli discussion. That's why if you go back to the al-fuqara and you take the alif lam to mean jins, then what it means is even if it goes to 1 individual, it's sufficient. It doesn't have to go to 3. Some of the Hanafis have also taken it a different way, and they've said that whenever you have a Jama that's idafa to a Jama, right, then that refers to individual. What does that mean? Like in the Quran, Allah says, يَجَعَلُونَ أَصَابِعَهُمْ فِي آذَانِهِمْ, they put their fingers in their ears. Yeah, Jama. So when you have a Jama, idafa to a Jama, give the books to the students. The books to the students. What we really mean is give each a book to a student. Yeah, so Jama idafa. Yeah, this is like a general rule, although there are some exceptions in this. So if you read, like, for example, Binaya, or you read others, they'll bring up these points. And you can check there. I won't go through it, but you can check over there. Okay, so he says, وَالَّذِي ذَهَبْنَا إِلَيْهِ مَرْوِيٌّ عَنْ Umar or Ibn Abbas. So therefore, that's also a strong position, because if Sahaba have held this position, that means it's fine for us. Next, وَلَا يَجُوزُ أَنْ يَدْفَعَ الزَّكَاةَ إِلَى ذِمِّيٍّ. So now, is it permissible to give zakat to a dhimmi, to a non-Muslim? So we've already verified that position of Umar radiallahu anhu, that he stopped the zakat being given to mu'allafat al-qulub. Yeah, so mu'allafat al-qulub no longer are now given zakat. Oh, by the way, one thing that I actually forgot to mention was, in Binaya, he actually mentions about, where it says about this Shafi position. There's more detail to the Shafi position. Alright, this is not, Sahib al-Hidayah has not really clarified the official Shafi position on this. So if you want to read more about the Shafi position, do the Shafis really say that every category has to be given 3? And like some strange scenarios, like for example, what about the Amil? So he says, according to Imam Nawawi and others, the Amil only 1 Amil can be given. Yeah, 1 Amil can be given. And what about scenarios where, let's say for example, there's 7 categories then, and let's say the amount of zakat that you've got is less than 7 dirhams. You've got 6 dirhams. How do you divide 6 dirhams between 7 people? Yeah, and then in each 7 categories, and then in each category 3. So there's these kind of like problematic things that if you want to read more about it, definitely look in the Shafi school. And if you want a book which is easier to read in the Shafi school, get yourself used to the Shafi school, there's a good book called Al-Mu'tamad. Yeah, Al-Mu'tamad. Yeah, so I think it's a 5 or 6 volume book. Al-Mu'tamad by Muhammad al-Zuhairi. This is a really nice book, and it kind of very easy to follow. It's, if you've studied Hanafi fiqh, then you'll understand most of it without problem. Okay, then he says, well, what about giving zakat to a dhimmi? So technically, a dhimmi, you can't give them zakat because we already talked about the mu'allafat al-qulub dropping. Yeah, so the mu'allafat al-qulub, whose hearts are meant to be reconciled. He says, لِقَوْلِ عَلَيْهِ السَّلَامِ لِمُعَاذ. He goes, because of the statement of the Prophet ﷺ for Mu'adh, خُذْهَا مِنْ أَغْنِيَائِهِمْ. Take the zakat from their rich, وَرُدَّهَا فِي فُقَرَائِهِمْ. And then give it back to their fuqara. So, this is again, if we ignore the mu'allafat al-qulub, if we ignore the mu'allafat al-qulub and we just look at faqr, poverty itself, so we say al-fuqara means poor, so doesn't that include non-Muslims as well? So in the Hanafi works, they discuss, for example, like what kind of sadaqah can you give to a non-Muslim? So there's a ikhtilaf between the Hanafis of whether you can give nafal sadaqah to non-Muslims. Can you give nafal sadaqah to non-Muslims or not? The stronger position seems to be yes, you can give nafal. You can give nafal to them. It's just the obligatory ones. And then in Binaya, he actually mentions 4 different types of Baytul Mal. 4 different types of funds that are Baytul Mal funds, you can say. So for example, like all the zakat funds and all associated zakat. And then number 2, you've got all that which comes in from the war booty. War booty that comes in. And then you've got all that money which is from those individuals that have passed away and haven't really left behind anyone. So as you guys know, in inheritance, there's like 10 categories of who gets your money. The last category, if there's no one there, it goes back to Baytul Mal. Baytul Mal takes it. And the 10th one is just general donations, general sort of like donations that they get. In fact, let me just show you guys this one. Binaya. Here it is. Okay, so where is it? Okay, this is if you remember, I told you about the reading the Shafi position. So he mentions like Shafi position on this masla. So the قال النووي, you can check that out yourself. Where is it? Okay, Razi, Ibn Sabil, Badaya. Okay, here he has a good discussion about the lams in Arabic. So he mentions there's about 10 types of lam in Arabic. He mentions over here, and Imam Zamakhshari has said the main reason for lam is ikhtisas. Is mukhtas bid them. That's a good point as well, I didn't mention. Which is, instead of saying the lam is for istihqaq, The lam is for mukhtas. In other words, this is khas for them. Yeah, they are the ones that are specified. This is the issue that I said to you about the three. وَلِهَذَا قَالَ النَّوَوِيُّ لَوْ كَانَ فِي أَكْثَرٍ من ثلاثة من الصنف لا يثبت ملكهم ولا ينتقل ورث بموتهم, and so forth. So that's the section that you can read about that. I just want to find this. Yeah, so this is the 4 types of funds that the Baytul Mal has. The 4 types of funds that Baytul Mal has. Yeah, so he says, وَجُمْلَةُ, so he says, in the explanation of Mukhtasar Tahawi, جُمْلَةُ مَا يَجِيبُ بَيْتُ الْمَالِ مِنْ الْأَمْوَالِ أَرْبَعَةُ أَنْوَاءٍ. 4 types of wealth come into Baytul Mal. What are they? Sadaqat, which includes zakat and all those ushur. Second type, ما أخذ من خمس الغنائم, the booty, right, and those kind of ma'dan and rikaz, treasures that are found in the ground. You get a fifth of that. And he says, this actually goes to, he says, إنما الصدقات الفقراء, these actually 2 types actually go to the poor people. This goes to the poor. Then he says, والنوع الثالث هو الخراج والجزية. So the kharaj and the jizya. Yeah, I missed that one out. That's the one. So kharaj and jizya, and any type of sulh that has been made with these particular types of tribes. And he says these are the ones that actually the money from this is given to tusraf hadi fi imarati ribatat. So building like these garrison forts, ribat, qanatir, bridges, jusur, so infrastructure for the city, sadd al-thughur, anhar, building rivers, and yusraf ila arzaq al-qudat, the judges are paid from this. Yeah, this is all the kharaj issues. And arzaq al-wulat, governors are paid, muhtasibin, muallimin, teachers are paid from this, muqatila, soldiers are paid. So this is the fund for that. And the 4th one is ما أخذ من تركة الميت, the one that I told you, the inheritance one. Yeah, that for مصرف هذا النفقة المرضى. So ill people are actually paid with this. في أدويتهم وعلاجهم وهم فقراء. So people who can't pay for their medicines, yeah, it comes from this. كفن الموتى, like people who die and they don't have enough money to pay for their funeral costs, then they're taken from this. Yeah, so he says this is, again, if you want to read that, that's a good little section there that he's got. So going back to this then. So he says, so you can't give zakat to the dhimmi, right? Because of this. Now this hadith, the Hanafis have said, if it was not for this hadith, there may have been some scope for giving dhimmi fuqara zakat. But because of this hadith, and this hadith has been widely accepted by everyone, the dhamir is going back to the Muslims. Because you only take zakat from the rich Muslims. So خُذْ مِنْ أَغْنِيَائِهِمْ, the rich of them, i.e. the Muslims, and رُدَّهَا إِلَى فُقَرَائِهِمْ. So because the fuqara'ihim is both there, hum and hum, that means that it's taken from the rich Muslims and given to the poor Muslims. That's why they say that the dhimmi is not permitted to be given this. This is, you're not allowed to give a dhimmi from the zakat. And like I said, they quote Imam Hanifa even saying this, that if it was not for this hadith, then we would have allowed dhimmis to receive, poor dhimmis to receive something. قال ويدفع إلى ما سوى ذلك من الصدقة. Yeah, so يدفع إليه ما سوى. So dhimmis can be given, are given, ما سوى ذلك, anything besides that, meaning zakat, sadaqatul fitr, and nadhr. These 3 that are usually mentioned. Zakat, sadaqatul fitr, and nadhr. Right? And kafarat, here 4. Yeah, it says in the Hashi as well. Sadaqatul fitr, and nudhur, and kafarat. These are 4 that are not allowed to be given to a non-Muslim because of this hadith of Mu'adh, but can be given to everyone else. Remember, Mu'adh was sent to Yemen, and in Yemen he's going to have to deal with zakat issues as well. وقال الشافعي لا يدفع. Imam Shafi says zakat cannot be given. So Imam Shafi says no sadaqah can be given to a dhimmi. لا يدفع. قال الشافعي لا يدفع. Whether it's zakat or whether it's non-zakat, you can't give it. If it's sadaqah, you can't give it to a dhimmi. وهو رواية عن أبي يوسف, and this is also in the riwayah that's been reported from Imam Abu Yusuf as well. Why? اعتبارا بالزكاة. Taking into consideration the zakat, meaning zakat cannot be given to them. So why can't these be given to them? Our response is تصدقوا. So Prophet ﷺ said تصدقوا على أهل الأديان كلها. Give zakat to all of the people of the religions, various religions. Support them. If they financially need help, you support them. And although it doesn't mention it over here, but in Radd al-Muhtar, in Binaya and Bahr-Raik, they mention about the verse of the Quran as well, where the verse of the Quran says, لا ينهاكم الله عن الذين لم يقاتلوكم في الدين ولم يخرجوكم من دياركم أن تبروهم وتقسطوا إليهم. Allah does not prohibit you from those people who have not fought you and have not expelled you to do birr with them, birr, to show kindness to them. And part of the birr is obviously financially supporting them as well. Yeah, أن تبروهم وتقسطوا إليهم, and to be just with them. So birr, ليس البر أن تولوا ولكن البر. Yeah, so birr is a type of kindness, being good, obedient to Allah, and part of that is sadaqah as well. So تصدقوا على أهل. Now, although this hadith is quite problematic, like for example over here he mentions أخرجه ابن بشيب مصنف سعيد جبير لا تصدقوا إلا على أهل دينكم فأنزل الله تعالى ليس عليك هداهم ولكن الله ما تفعلوا من خير يوفى إليكم قال رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم تصدقوا على أهل أديان. Yeah. So he says the problem with this hadith, they say, is هذه مراسيل. Yeah, it's considered mursal. But we don't have a problem with mursal, because for us mursal is considered to be fine. In the early years, mursal, the mursal of the Sahaba, mursal of the Tabi'een, and mursal Taba Tabi'een. Imam al-Jassas has explained this in a lot of detail in his book Al-Fusul fil Usul. Al-Fusul fil Usul. It's an usul book, and it's a very good usul book. It's a bit hard to read, but I would definitely recommend you guys to try and read advanced usul books, because they have a lot of what someone who needs to develop their fiqh is found in usul books. And he says I'la Sunan. So I'la Sunan is also another really good book for you guys to read if you want to try to get a sort of like a glimpse, an understanding of how evidences work in the Hanafi school, right? Especially hadith evidence. So how Hanafis deal with hadith. So it's a 19-volume book. It's a very good book written by Zafar Ahmad Uthmani, who was the nephew of Mullah Ashraf Ali Tanwi. So you can have a read of that. It's very useful. Anyway, so he says, وَلَوْلَا حَدِيثُ مُعَاذ. If it was not for the hadith of Mu'adh, we would have even said it would have been jaiz in zakat as well. Yeah, so if it was not for the hadith of Mu'adh, that's how much this one hadith of Mu'adh has now affected the fiqh ruling for dhimmis as well. So if it was not for the hadith of Mu'adh, we would have even allowed giving not just non-zakat, but also zakat to the non-Muslims. Now, if you look into Binaya, in Binaya, I'm just going to show you what he says. Okay, he says, قَوْلُ خُذْهَا مِنْ أَغْنِيَائِهِ. He says, هذا بالإجماع. This is بالإجماع. لأن الزكاة لا تجب على الكافر. So the damir, he discusses that as damir issue over here. And this is interesting as well. He says, جوز دفع صدقة الفطر. It's been permitted to give your صدقة الفطر to ruhban, to monks, Christian monks. And this has been permitted by Umar ibn Shurahbil wa Murra al-Hamdani. وعن أبي يوسف. Abu Yusuf has 3 riwayats about this. That are you allowed to give this? والأصح أنه لا يجوز دفع الصدقة إليهم إلا تطوع. You cannot give the Christian monks your sadaqah unless it's voluntary. Yeah, and the others have said no, you can't give it. Yeah, so that's another interesting point, how some of the scholars allowed sadaqah al-fitr there. Okay. Okay, here also another good point that he raises, which is لِمَا لَا يَجُوزُ دَفْءُ الزَّكَاةِ إِلَى الذِّمِّ. Why can't we give our zakat to a dhimmi, a poor dhimmi who is, like illegible? كما ذهب إليه زفر لأموم النصوص. So it seems as though Zufar, rahimahullah, had taken the position that it's permissible to give your zakat to a dhimmi. And the argument was that because this hadith of Mu'adh is khabar wahid, if you take this khabar wahid, you're basically adding to the Quran. Is ziyada al-kitab. The Quran does not mention anything about not being allowed to give to a dhimmi. So the response, he says, either we say that this is considered to be khabar mashhur talaqqat al-umma bil qabul, and therefore it can be used, or that's it. It's only one answer. The second one is just a repeat of the first one. It's just a mistake, I think, typo. Okay, so let's see this statement where he says Lola hadith Mu'adh. Okay, it says ولولا حديث معاذ كما قال زفر فلولا حديث معاذ. If there was no hadith of Mu'adh, it says لم يجب عن الأول وجوابه ما ذكرنا لأنه مخصوص في حق الحرب والمستعمل. So this is basically saying that, this إنما ينهاكم الله عن الذين قاتلوكم, the ayah that I recited to you, this is the second part of the ayah. They're saying that this was in reference to the harbi. You're not supposed to financially help the harbi, a non-Muslim who is living in non-Muslim lands or a temporary resident of a Muslim lands. He's saying that this is the one who you're not supposed to help financially. As for the other, then you can financially support the dhimmi. ولكن يقتضي أن يكون التخصيص مقارن عندنا وليس بثابت. And he goes into, so you can have a little read of that. He goes into this, and then at the end he just says لأن التصدق عليهم رحمة لهم ومواساة. Giving sadaqah to the non-Muslim dhimmi is considered to be something which is a type of mercy, and muasat, showing some sort of care and concern for them. وهي منافية لمقتضى الآية, and this seems to go against what the ayah is saying. وليس في مرتبتها. And then he goes on. So have a read of that. The point is that the scholars did discuss this issue of non-Muslims. Can you financially support them, or can you not financially support them? Is it considered to be supporting kufr if you're supporting them? But the idea is, if you're allowed, so you have to remember, if you're allowed to marry a non-Muslim woman, or you're allowed to allow non-Muslims to buy and sell wine and pork in a Muslim country, then it clearly shows there is some room to allow non-Muslims to freely allow them to be able to express their religion within limits. Okay, and then he says, وَلَوْلَا حَدِيثُ مُعَاذ لَقُلْنَا بِالْجَوَازِ. I think this is an important point that he's saying. That sometimes a whole fiqh ruling can be affected simply by one hadith that's appeared. That's why Imam Zufar seems to be on the opinion that the dhimmi can be given. And in this case, he's saying that because of that hadith, we can't really take that. وَلَا يُبْنَى بِهَا مَسْجِدٌ. A masjid cannot be built with zakat money. Now this is like these common sort of questions people get, especially when it comes to nowadays these charities. Because the charities that we have in the West, they are NGOs. They are not really affiliated to a government. They are working within their own limits, and they sometimes have certain projects where people give their zakat. And sometimes we have to obviously be very careful about these, because sometimes these organizations do not follow any fiqh, or they just follow a particular scholar without really kind of having understanding of how zakat works out. I've seen this firsthand with some charities out there. So you just got to be careful. So zakat cannot be used to build a mosque. You can't get zakat money and build a mosque with it. وَلَا يُكَفَّنْ بِهَا مَيِّتٌ. And nor can it be used to shroud a dead. Why is this for? Because the Hanafis say the main thing is tamlik. Because in the ayah of the Quran, Allah says, إِنَّمَا الصَّدَقَاتُ لِلْفُقَرَى. Li means it has to be given as ownership to them. لِإِنْعِدَامِ التَّمْلِيك. Because of the absence of ownership. What does ownership mean? Ownership means that you give something to someone, it has to be something physical, and they can do whatever they want with it. That's what ownership is. So he says, لِإِنْعِدَامِ, because of the absence of transferal of ownership, وَهُوَ rukun, and this is considered to be the pivotal or the cornerstone of zakat. You have to make someone an owner. Now, because you have to make someone an owner, no one owns a masjid. The masjid is considered to be the waqf. Yeah, it's just purely for Allah's sake. Therefore, because no one owns it, you can't build a mosque. Yeah, so because if you build a mosque, who are you building it for? The public are going to be using it. So any sort of a structure, any sort of thing that is for public use, whether rich people use it or poor people use it, you cannot use it for zakat because tamliq, there's no tamliq. But if there is an element of tamliq, how can there be an element of tamliq? For example, like let's say there's a poor person. I remember there was a case, there's a lady once, she asked that in Bangladesh, she had relatives, and those relatives were very poor. So what she wanted to do was she wanted to give them zakat, but she wanted them to build a house for themselves. So basically what she wanted to do was she wanted to build a house with the zakat money and give it to them. So there's two problems here. The first problem is you can't dictate to the recipients of how they need to use the zakat. You're not allowed to dictate, because then that goes against the whole concept of ownership. Because ownership means you transfer ownership to them, they do whatever they want with it. You can't dictate. And I remember she was saying to me that, she said, I want them to build a house. And I said, look, you can't do that, you can't dictate. And then she said, well, if I give the money to them, they're just going to waste it on buying food for themselves. And I said, well, if your relatives have to buy food for themselves with that money, that shows that they're in need. Wouldn't it make sense for them to buy food for themselves rather than a house? The food is something that's going to fill their stomachs and keep them alive. So that's the first problem. The second problem is if you build a house, the problem over here is that you build a house with the zakat money and then you give that zakat money to that individual. Here, obviously, there's going to be problems with how much money is going to be, how is the money going to be used to build the house, how are the materials going to be purchased and all that kind of thing. So the money is not mishandled. So that's where these kind of problems, and sometimes charities have these problems as well, where they'll be collecting zakat money to build a house for someone or another structure, and that house has to be given ownership. So the way they usually do it is to overcome all of this. The way they usually do it is they first of all find the poor person. So let's say, for example, this Bangladesh village, we find the poor person there, and then we tell them that we're going to build a house for you with zakat money. Are you okay with that? So they kind of make us their wakil, the agent on their behalf. So now when we build a house for them, we're not building it with zakat money, we're actually building it with their instruction. So the zakat has been transferred, transfer of ownership has been done, and we're just building the house for them because they've said that. So this is almost like kind of a way to overcome this. I would definitely, if someone has a lot of questions about charities, how charities work, and this 100%, 100% donation policies and all that, I would definitely encourage them to work closely with charities to understand how all this works, because a lot of people have no idea how 100% donations work. It's just like a misleading statement. This is when people say this charity is 100% charity, or nowadays it's like 125% charity. I think a lot of people get misled with this statement. It's unfair. They should be very transparent how it works. And people don't understand how charities work behind the scenes. There's so many things going on. So that's why I would definitely say, if you're interested in how that zakat works and all that, get in touch with a charity that's a reliable charity. Ask them that you want to volunteer for them, and you just want to see how everything works. You'll do the volunteering, and that way you'll get a better picture of how zakat works. Or another good way would be if you can get in contact with National Zakat Foundation and tell them you want to do some volunteering work. Yeah, in Ramadan they have a lot of opportunities for volunteering, and that way you can see how zakat in the UK it works as well. In the past, I've worked with the National Zakat Foundation a few times, and I've answered a lot of phone calls for them, and it helped me a lot in understanding how people's monies work, how their money works, and then how zakat is supposed to be given. So anyway, so la yubna biha masjid is a very important concept. Masjids cannot be built with it. Likewise, you cannot build with it like schools. You can't build a school with zakat money. You can't build wells with zakat money. You can't build any structure which no one particular individual owns. If workers take their wages from the charity raised, is that valid? if workers, so which workers? Are you talking about the charity organization? So the charity organization's income has different sources of income. So let's say, for example, this is a charity. I'm a charity. The incomes that come in come from different sources. Some come from zakat, some come from sadaqah, some comes from just general gifts that are given to the charity. There's different types. So the workers, technically, this is where there's an ikhtilaf now. Can the workers working in a charity, an NGO charity, can they allocate for themselves a percentage for admin fees from the zakat? This is where there's an ikhtilaf in contemporary scholars. Some scholars say no, because it's not affiliated to a Muslim government, and that is the job of the Muslim government. Like Mufti Taqi Usmani is quite strict on this. But there's others who say, because there is no government involved over here, and there is like a very strong need for people to use this, then they allow it. Yeah, but then they only allow like a certain amount. Right? They'll say, for example, we only take, 9% or something of the zakat for admin fees. So it's like all that kind of ikhtilaf based upon that. But there's nothing categorical to say that can an NGO take it or not take it in that sense. The only thing is that obviously people mistreating. So there's people out there for organizations out there. Like for example, a lot of these non-Muslim charities, they take 70 to 80% of the charity, non-Muslim ones obviously, 70 to 80 for admin costs. So when you give your money to a non-Muslim charity, from every pound you give, probably 20 pence or 10 pence is going to go to the charity. It's going to go to the poor. The rest is all spent on admin fees. Yeah. And clearly there has to be admin. There's a lot of people who are admin. They've got to take out their time and they've got to, be paid. So this is why that's something which is... So la yubna biha masjid. A masjid cannot be built with this. Wala yukaf. But so in Pakistan madrasas, what tends to happen is Pakistan madrasas, a lot of them, and this is probably the case in India and Bangladesh as well, in most madrasas, is free of charge to study there. Totally free. The only fees you have to pay for is possibly food, things like that. So how do they get the way that they get their income usually is by people donating, zakat, and animal skins. So in Eid al-Adha, when they slaughter animals and people donate their animal skins to the madrasa. But the zakat cannot be used for building, it cannot be used for fittings, it can't be used for that. So because a lot of zakat comes in, what they used to do in the madrasa that I studied in was the poor students on a monthly basis were given a stipend. And what would happen is, like, these two guys used to come in, the treasurers, and they would call out the students one by one, the ones that are deserving, and then they would hand them a few sort of like 100 or maybe 1,000 rupees, and then they would say, okay, take this, and then the rest of it give it to this guy. So it was like a kind of, you can almost say like a healer, yeah, like a stratagem to try and fund the madrasa as well. So that way, what was happening is as though the student is becoming the owner of the money, and then they were giving that money to the individual as well. Yeah, so these are kind of healers that some of the Hanafis have come out with of how zakat can be given. Like if there's a lot of zakat and there's a big need of a madrasa to be run or a masjid to be run, this is the way that you can do it. It's like a healer method. And many other scholars are against this and saying this sort of defeats the purpose. So this was a healer method that some people adopted. Similarly, for example, like in like poor countries where hospital fees, medicine fees, similar kind of thing works over there as well. What might happen over there is that your zakat money might go to the hospital. It's not going to go to build the hospital, but what happens is the poor will take it, and the poor will, from that amount of money, will give a portion of it to the hospital, yeah, for running the hospital. So again, there's like the different strategies that they come out with. The idea is that in the society, these kind of things need to be run, but then how do you manage them when there's no government that's actually funding them anymore? Yeah, so there's these kind of issues that they have. So لا يبنى بها مسجد ولا يكفن بها ميت لإنعدام التمليك, because there's no tamlik there. Okay, I think we'll stop there. Okay, so let's have a look at then what we covered today. Okay, so just on the side note, so if you look at the bottom over here, It says masjidun wa kada la tubna bil qanatir. You can't build with it bridges, siqayat. You can't build with it like places for irrigating or for water fountains. Wala yuhfar bil abar, and it cannot be used for infrastructure like building wells, digging wells, these kind of things. Okay, so what do we cover today? So today we covered, we said, what does it mean that you give your zakat to any category? So we say you can give it to any category, and you can give it to as many as you like. Shafi say no, you have to give it to each category and at least 3 individuals because of the word jama has been mentioned. And he says the lam in lil fuqara, it comes for istihqaq. Yeah, so this is for istihqaq, meaning that this is mustahiq, they are deserving of this. Our response to this is that we don't accept this lam for istihqaq. We say that Allah's haqq is the zakat is for Allah. And then Allah, He identifies to us who the individuals are that can receive this with a illa. Faqr is an illa, maskana is an illa. And we also say that because of this, these individuals now have been treated like masarif rather than be mustahiqeen. Yeah, mustahiqeen. And we also have, narrations from Umar and Ibn Abbas to say that you don't have to give to all of them. Okay, what about giving zakat to a dhimmi, a non-Muslim living in a Muslim country? So the dominant position, everyone's position, is that you cannot give your zakat to them. Imam Zufar differs with them. Imam Zufar says you can give your zakat to them because the Quran doesn't really prohibit it, and the hadith is khabar wahid. And Imam, as for nafal sadaqah, you can give nafal sadaqah if you want. That's fine to them. Shafi doesn't even allow that. Yeah, he says you can't even do that. And one riwayah of Abu Yusuf doesn't allow that as well. And we talked about in Binaya where he talks about giving it to the monks as well. Where one riwayah of Abu Yusuf allows giving it to Sadaqat al-Fitr, at least to the monks. And then this interesting point where he says, if it wasn't for the hadith of Mu'adh, we would have even allowed zakat to be given to poor dhimmis. And then finally we talked about the building of mosques cannot be done by zakat money, and nor when it comes to kafan of the mayyit. Okay, any questions? Alright, then take it. Okay, so when it comes to next lesson, it's going to be after Ramadan, okay? So we're going to have a Ramadan break, inshallah. Have a wonderful Ramadan. May Allah accept all of our actions. And inshallah, after Ramadan, I'll let you know when classes start. Inshallah. Okay, guys, take care, inshallah. Assalamu alaikum.